I recently lost an aunt to cancer. I lost another aunt to ALS and an uncle to dementia. I could go on, but I'm not unique. We're all fighting our own battles. And besides, I'm one of the lucky ones. I have 2 young daughters who mean the world to me. That's actually why I find the future so exciting. Imagine a world where we can harness science to better defend against viruses and disease. A world where technology continues to improve the quality of our lives. I think of the future I would love my daughters to have and what I might do if they were to become sick. And I wonder, is that so bad? To use the tools and knowledge at our fingertips to improve our lives? Well, as you think about that, remember, there are many cautionary tales about using technology to better our existence, only to sometimes create tragedy instead. Like the Titan Prometheus, who gifted fire to humanity, and who, in return for the trouble he caused, was chained to a rock for eternity. And in the novel Frankenstein, subtitled The Modern Prometheus, Victor Frankenstein cuts himself off from everyone he knows and succeeds in creating life, and then cannot face the hideousness of his creation. And the final irony is that the creation, the monster, shows more humanity than its creator. In the 1994 film, the creature says, "I have love in me, the likes of which you can scarcely imagine." But Victor Frankenstein is blinded to that because although science and technology can bring us forward, it can also dehumanize, make us forget who we are as people and that we are connected to each other. Facebook has been described as a contemporary Frankenstein monster. And the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, has said he's not worried about artificial intelligence giving computers the ability to think like people, but rather that people will begin to think like computers without values or compassion. And the truth is, for all our efforts to improve our future, there are things we cannot change, like suffering. We might reduce it, but as Viktor Frankl said, suffering is relative. Like a gas, it fills the available space. And regardless of what form it takes, suffering exists for us all. A sickness, a loss, a struggle to make ends meet. That's why we have these metaphors of life as a battle. Marcus Aurelius wrote that life is warfare, and it starts the second we are born because the triumph of life can only happen through the pain of birth. Pain and suffering are as much a part of our lives as joy or love. So much so that Joseph Campbell's hero's journey could be summarized as simply as hero wanders, hero suffers, hero returns. And at the end of that journey, when our war is over, what is there to look forward to? Death. After everything we will experience in life, the joys and the pains, we also face the certainty of death. And whether it happens 50 years from now or the second we leave this room, we're all living a death sentence. But death isn't our enemy, nor suffering. No, these things are liberating because they force us to think about what we will do with the time we have, and in turn, how we will live. And if Marcus Aurelius is right, we do that by being warriors. What does that even mean? These days, we have fitness warriors and equality warriors and weekend warriors. So for the term to mean anything, we have to dig deep to the qualities of the warrior archetype, such as aggression. Not in the sense of violent behavior, but the forceful pursuit of our goals, or having the courage to leave every part of ourselves on the table. A warrior must have the clarity of mind to see the world for what it is, not necessarily what they would like it to be, although they must keep faith that they will prevail in the end. And to do that, a warrior must have the self-discipline to train until their actions become instinctive, because in the heat of battle, thinking too much can lead to inaction, and inaction can lead to death. And knowledge of death may be what best defines a warrior. The nature of violence and war is that the killing blow could come at any time. And so a warrior must live with the knowledge that each moment could be their last. And so we have courage and clarity of mind and self-discipline, all admirable qualities, and yet something is missing. In 2013, I was on the verge of promotion to lieutenant colonel. Over the previous decade, I spent nearly 3 years in Afghanistan fighting a dangerous and determined adversary. I had a uniform full of badges, I was a general's aide, and the future looked bright. I was also profoundly angry, the type of anger that rarely shows itself and yet slowly poisons everything you say and do. By the time my wife was pregnant and my supervisors encouraged me to take parental leave, and of course I said no. Work was too important. And one night I came home angry after my day in cubicle land, and my wife sat me down and said she didn't know what was going on with me, but I'd best figure it out. And I had no idea how to do that. So I took that leave. And we came up with a schedule where each of us had a bit of time to ourselves. And what I discovered in my time was that I had no idea what to do with myself. I had no hobbies. I'd given up reading and music, martial arts as I'd advanced in my profession. And this isn't work-life balance. Work-life balance implies that our lives are simply what we do when we're not at work. And that was not what was missing in my life. What was missing were moments when I felt alive. But the idea of balance is useful, and it has a place in warrior traditions because without it, those qualities of the warrior become skewed. Unchecked aggression can become sadism, so it must be balanced by humility. And clarity of mind can become hypervigilance, so that must be balanced by mindfulness. And self-discipline can become coldness, so that must be balanced by compassion. But above all else, if a warrior is defined by knowledge of their own mortality, then this must be balanced by a willingness to live life and appreciate the beauty in life. And this often took place through art. The samurai consciously tried to live life as richly as possible. And the Spartans taught both singing and dancing in the agoge. Here in North America, First Nations warriors danced, as did warriors around the world. Now, it may be that activities like dance are common in warrior traditions simply because they involve the same skills required in battle. I'll spare you the visual of me dancing, but picture footwork and timing, stamina, strength. But maybe there's something more, something to do with art itself. I mean, for many of us, art is abstract, but what do we really know about it? Art is used to entertain. It's used to sell things and for healing. Art also has symbolic functions, like the poppy and Remembrance Day. The only reason the poppy symbolizes lives lost to war is because of the meaning we've attached to it through art. In Flanders fields, the poppies blow. Between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly. Scarce heard amid the guns below. Tolstoy claimed that if thought is communicated through speech, then emotion is communicated through art. And if that's true, then art helps us see through the eyes of others and understand the most basic part about what it means to be human, to love, to be scared, to know joy. And at the same time, art gives us a way to share those feelings with others. And I would offer that art can come in many forms. Singing, painting, dancing, of course, but also motorcycle maintenance or computer programming, whatever opens us to moments of beauty and helps us feel alive. Maybe that's why Marcus Aurelius encouraged himself to see beauty in everyday things, like the baking of bread. But opening ourselves up doesn't come without cost. A few years ago, I took my oldest daughter to see the movie Inside Out. And there's a scene about halfway through where a little girl's imaginary friend makes a sacrifice. And if someone had told me before seeing that movie that a cartoon character named Bing Bong would reduce me to tears, I might have thought twice about going. Because there I am. And the theater has gotten really hot since I'm sweating, like from my eyes. And I think of something that my mom used to say, which was that one day you will know what it means to be a parent. And I'd always just written that off as something moms say. I mean, it's not that hard, right? Except knowing and understanding are different. And so I'm sitting there, and my daughter goes, "Dad, what happened to Bing Bong?" And I can't answer her because I don't trust myself to speak. And that's when it hits me that I understand my mom's point completely. What it means to love someone so much, you would die for them. And I feel it. I mean, it feels like someone has reached into my chest and is ripping out my heart. And there's no other medium that can communicate that feeling. That's art. Look, it's not lost on me that until very recently, I never would have imagined that I would be arguing to make art a part of your day. And yet, here I am, and I have no regrets about that. I found my balance in writing, and much of what I write is garbage. But that's okay, because I found a passion for storytelling. And maybe that's not surprising considering the long history of storytelling, especially among warriors. It passes the time, sure, but more importantly, it helps us make sense of things we don't understand, like our feelings, although it can be awkward. The first time I shared one of my stories, I was more nervous than a teenager on a first date. But that's normal, because art is like life, especially the kind of art that makes our hearts beat faster in our chests. It can be messy and emotional and touched with a bit of sadness because everything has to end sometime. And yet mixed into all of that is beauty and grace and joy. Joy cannot exist without sadness. That's what Inside Out tells us. That's why Dostoevsky wrote that the awful thing about beauty is that it is both mysterious and terrible. It makes us feel, and that makes us vulnerable, and it would be so much easier to cut ourselves off like Victor Frankenstein and lose ourselves in the latest that science and technology has to offer. The danger in that is that at some point our creations may become more human than we are. And once we compromise on our humanity, all bets are off. And that's why we have to fight. Commit to living life and appreciating beauty in whatever form that takes, and be willing to share those feelings with others, regardless of how it might hurt. Because we are not alone. And we may disagree over ideas and speak different languages, but we are united as humanity for the simple fact that we all have the potential, at least, to feel. And art is how we share those feelings. I think that's why Dostoevsky also wrote that beauty would save the world. Still, I'm not naive about the power of art. Sigmund Freud wrote that art is not strong enough to prevent real suffering. He's right. Art isn't going to change that people are being killed because of the color of their skin or what god they worship. And art isn't going to keep our loved ones alive as much as we might want it to. No, Freud is right. Art isn't strong enough to prevent that kind of suffering. But it may help us remember to live in the midst of that suffering. And if enough of us remember that art can connect us to our fellow human beings, then maybe that's enough. So whatever the future brings, I ask that you face it like a warrior. Have the self-discipline to put down the technology, the clarity of mind to be present for moments that make you feel alive, and the courage to share those feelings with others. Thank you.